My name is Pamela Quan, and as the executive director of the DisOrient Asian American Film Festival of Oregon, I welcome you to this discussion from Eugene. For 17 years, DisOrient has nurtured a space to promote understanding about Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander narratives that are so underrepresented in media. We've come to understand the power of media representation and, conversely, the powerlessness of not being visible. Some of the things that don't get a lot of attention are queer stories in general, and even more so our own queer stories from within our own AA-NHPI communities. Let's spend some time to start conversations that reflect LGBTQ+ voices. We're here today to talk with filmmakers of 4 notable films in our program. It's my pleasure to introduce the director of Rice Street, Dan Ya. Hey.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. The director and writer of Dog Story, Grace Zhang.
Hi, thanks, Pam.
Thank you for being here. The director of One Lift at a Time, Flo Singer. Hey, Flo. And the director, writer, and editor of Midnight Rhythms, Quincy Wu.
Hello.
Hey. Welcome. We're delighted to have you all here, and we have a lot to talk about. I'd like to have each of you give a brief synopsis of your film and why you wanted to make this film. Flo, let's start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So my film is a short documentary called One Lift at a Time about an up-and-coming young transgender weightlifter who is making his way into professional weightlifting and Olympic weightlifting. So, and the challenges of gender politics in sports and how that affects him.
Anne.
Yeah, so my film is called Rice Street. It's a accumulation of 3 different stories that kind of tie together through misfortune and odd circumstances. I really wanted to make this film because it's 3 different experiences that I've had in my life, and I just wanted to tell those stories and show the world these vibrant characters that I've kind of created.
Great. Quincy.
Yeah, my film is called Midnight Rhythms. It's a conceptual, poetic, narrative short film just about the journey, the queer journey of just coming to terms with yourself. Yeah.
Beauty of virtual reality that we're in. Yes, thank you. And why did you why did you want to make this film?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
I thought it was just, for me, it's just important to tell queer stories, and especially queer stories featuring just people of color and Asian Americans like myself. So.
Great, thank you. Grace.
So my short film is called Dog Story. It's a narrative short that follows a high schooler named Joe who's kind of just like starting to come to terms with their changing body and changing gender identity. And just like exploring the both masculine and feminine aspects of themselves and like the difficulties that come with doing that in an environment that's like primarily white.
Yes.
Oh, I was just gonna say, sorry. Yeah, I hadn't like made a short before exploring like queer identity or gender, and it just felt like the right time to do that.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit more in depth with each of you, and let's start with Grace and Dog Story. What is the significance of the title?
So I had started off with a different title. It used to be called Good Girl. There is a dog in the story that the main character kind of finds comfort in. And in the original script, the dog is kind of, it's like a stray that the main character kind of like encounters as a mysterious figure. But yeah, like I worked really closely with the main actor that I cast, and it was kind of like as the film progressed, so did their own gender journey. And so by the time I edited it, like didn't really feel like the original title was fitting anymore. Um, and Dog Story was like a placeholder title I had in my deck, and I just like ended up liking how it sounded. I like how it doesn't really like suggest any gender, and kind of like hints more like towards the dog as like an image or like a symbol.
Oh, that's beautiful. You deal with bullying and violence towards queer youth. That's a very sensitive topic. Tell me about that.
Um, I think looking back, if I were to make this film differently, I don't think I would make the bullying as kind of like on the nose like that. But I think at the time of writing, it was like a super sensitive subject, and I just like really wanted to portray like the difficulties of growing up in an environment like that. Um,
I think
because like a lot,
acknowledging it is huge,
yeah,
acknowledging it so that we can be aware. And
yeah, definitely. I think like a lot of it was pulled from like my own upbringing. Like I grew up on Long Island, which is a like primarily white neighborhood, and there were very few other people of color when I went to high school. So it was like definitely important to like keep those friendships close to my heart, and also like acknowledge the difficulties of like being othered in a way that was like through your gender and also like through your race.
absolutely. Your characters, Joe and Lucy, have a really, interesting friendship. Um, their coming of age. What was important for you to capture about Joe?
Um, I think Joe is very much an observer,
Mhm.
and kind of like their friendship was with Lucy was inspired by like my childhood best friend, who is like hyper feminine and also like very confident in her like femininity. And I like simultaneously looked up to it in a way where I was like I wish I could have that kind of confidence, but not really like portray it in this way. Um, and I think I really wanted to capture like some tension in like them being really close, but also Lucy not totally being able to understand Joe completely, because because she is like so comfortable in her femininity, it's like she doesn't um like just like totally understand all the struggles that Joe is going through.
Right.
And
She's a
just like
little
capturing,
oblivious. Yeah.
yeah, even though she is like trying to be there for her as a friend, trying to be there for Joe as a friend and trying to listen, I think there's still some like miscommunication that happens.
Right. Well, thank you. I think it was a really beautiful way to bring awareness to people how to be a friend, how to be a good friend, maybe listen more and pay attention. So thank you.
Thank you.
Flo, I'd love to talk with you about your film, One Lift at a Time.
Yes.
So you deal with, a trans plus athlete. This is a very much a solo sport. And it's where the lead draws a lot of attention, wanted or unwanted, on themselves because it is a solo sport. How'd you meet Evereco?
So Ever and I actually go to the same school, and we met through because I'm a queer studies minor, and we had the same class a couple years back, and we just had a lot in common, a lot of intersecting identities, and we just clicked. And then I've been following Z's weightlifting career, and the beginnings of it. And yeah, I was just really interested in learning more about weightlifting and just what it's like to be a trans plus person in weightlifting, since it is very individual and like most sports, very gendered sport as well. And being a multi-gendered person in a sport like that. So
Exactly. Gender and athletics are very controversial these days. You touch on that, like people are trying to pick out advantages, disadvantages, and you talk about that aspect. How does Ever handle all of this, and does he have any additional insights as to what it's like to be a trans plus athlete in these circumstances?
Yeah. So the first time that I talked to Ever about, in terms of like a support system and knowing other trans athletes, Z said like that there was an online forum. Z joined like a Twitter group, and something that like Z talked about was a lot of the trans athletes in these, whether it was weightlifting or swimming or track, or they were all very individual sports, which was a very interesting connection that that we just talked about. So I think just having more of a support system. And I remember the first time we talked, she said that she only knew 5 other trans weightlifters in the nation, just by having direct contact. But recently, Z was added into this Discord with a lot more trans athletes. I don't know if it's specific to weightlifting, but there are weightlifters in there, which is exciting development.
That's encouraging to hear. Does Z have family support?
I can't really speak to that.
Okay.
But
okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious. It's definitely cool to see an ambitious and capable athlete of mixed race identity too. Did you connect with that?
Yeah. One of the connections that we had were being of mixed race identity. Ever is half Japanese and I'm half Chinese. And so, and we're both Jewish. And so we're just like, oh, hey. And then, yeah, that was just kind of the beginning of our conversation in class. So.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your film, and everyone go check it out if you haven't already seen it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure. Next, I'd like to talk with Quincy about Midnight Rhythms.
Hi.
Hey, I love the feeling you evoked driving through Portland at night. I don't think Portland's ever looked so cool. Those are usually reserved for big cities. That's like, you handled it like it was New York. So thank you for doing that. You represented Oregon. In your film, you laid out some specific designs to tell your story. Can you describe your vision for some of the scenes?
I think, the backbone of my film really centers around these poems I wrote. So I think that was the driving inspiration of each scene. And I just wanted to really evoke just kind of this feeling of slipping between reality and this conceptual space of just self-reflection and just that internal journey of our hero.
Right.
Yeah.
And your main character was really dealing with self-acceptance. And
Yes.
How hard is that being Asian American and queer?
I don't know, that's a very the whole, just that intersectionality of being Asian and queer is different, I think. I think for me personally, my biggest, I guess, kind of issue that I've journeyed through is just that queerness for me. And wanting to, and as an Asian American, just wanting to also honor that and be truthful to that and have that representation of, Asian American queer, a queer Asian American person, and that we exist. Yeah, that's
Well, you know, how hard is it for you to write poetry? Where do you draw your inspirations?
Inspiration for my poetry really, I don't know, just stems from lots of places. Music, just art I see. A lot of the poetry featured in my film, which is really taken from, is almost autobiographical and really taken from just this specific period of my life where I was going through that journey and just understanding myself and my sexuality and all that. So yeah, that was the biggest inspiration for a lot of all that.
Right. Your character was extremely vulnerable, and it was beautiful. Did
Yeah.
did you randomly or intentionally portray a biracial relationship?
One of the things when approaching actually making the film, I definitely wanted to have our lead person be Asian American. That was a conscious decision, and I think having a biracial couple was just it just happened that way. I think, yeah, I think we were just open to whatever possibilities came our way. But yeah, for the lead, especially, I wanted to have someone that looked like me, essentially. Yeah.
Oh, great. And you told your story using choreography, poetry and choreography and costumes. Can you talk about the choreography and costumes?
That's just kind of the fun things that I really love, just like fashion and dance. And one of the biggest inspirations for this film was just a lot of like music videos. And yeah, so that's just the creative vision for creating something that involves lots of music and movement and high-end fashion as much as we could. Was something that I really wanted to infuse into the story and really show different expressions as well with fashion and all that. Yeah.
I liked the scene where the city's is waking up.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like it was a beautiful metaphor for the internal process that the character was going through. So well done.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. And let's talk with Danielle about Rice Street. Dan, you had multiple storylines going on and you wove them so beautifully together. They were all different stories, all centered around this working class Hmong community. And maybe you were trying to show us that we're all more connected than we really realize, because they were all different stories. Your theme of the fragility of life, especially in these poorer communities, is real. We see that with COVID. It just takes like one simple event that could derail life. What was it important for you to cast Hmong actors in this film?
Yeah, I felt like the story is very universal. It doesn't, you don't have to be Hmong to experience those things, but
Right.
I felt like my story, I specifically wanted to cast Hmong actors and tell it from a Hmong perspective, because I felt like the stories that the three were based on, we have our queer character, we have our character who is kind of like a gangster, and then we have our young female who is a mail order bride. And so these three stories are all stories that are very prevalent within the Hmong community, and oftentimes they're made a joke of, and so it's kind of just thrown under the rug or brushed off and never really humanized or never really told. And so I really wanted to explore those characters, and so that's why I made a conscious decision to cast Hmong actors and tell it from a Hmong perspective.
That was a good choice. What was your casting process like?
So I haven't worked with any of these actors before, but I've kind of always watched their stuff. And so I've always wanted to work with them. And so in the back of my mind, when I was writing the story, I kind of already knew who I wanted. And so I didn't really do a casting call. I specifically wanted these three actors. And so I kind of stalked them for a couple of years. And finally, when I had the story ready, I was like, hey, I really want to work with you guys. So it was just as simple as sending them an email, and they were gracious enough to say yes and devote their summer to shoot the film. So
Yeah. You had multiple stories, more than three, because there was some kind of half storylines in between. So it was really artfully done. In one of the stories, you had a character named Gur. Am I pronouncing that right?
Sure.
Jur. Thank you. Jur was struggling with gender identity, but you also, like you mentioned, dealt with gang violence and the vulnerability of poor women in a patriarchal society. But why did you feel compelled to add Jur's story? Because you had a full film with the other two.
Right.
You could have just done that, but you made a point of including this one. So
yeah, I think Jur's character deals with a lot of things, specifically from the Hmong community. One of the biggest issues that the Hmong community deals with is identity issues. And so not only do you have to deal with your sexual preference or sexual identity, you have to deal with the Hmong identity. And we are historically a people of refugees. We've fled many, many countries, and we don't have a country of our own. And so every country that we've fled to, we've kind of lost our identity, or we've picked up a little bit of the culture that we've lived in that. So our identity has always been really difficult to define. So it's really hard to say Hmong people are this, right? Because we don't have something like that. And so Jur's character deals with, his sexual identity, his sexual orientation, but also the identity of trying to be a traditional Hmong boy that lives in America, who grew up in America, and trying to just come to grips with himself. And so I felt like his character was actually very much needed in my film.
Great. I noticed that you had portrayed male comments that are very common, that are very hurtful, that people take for granted, and for a while had been socially acceptable to say in a public setting, and now we're gaining a little bit more awareness of that. So you put a lot into your film. You also mentioned that you had personal connections to a lot of these stories. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. Rice Street is actually where I grew up. I've lived there all my life. And when I tell people about Rice Street, they're like, there's a street called Rice Street. And it's like, yeah, there is. It's just ironic that that street is such a diversely populated by so many different types of Asians, right? We have Chinese, Laotians, Cambodians, Hmong, and it's just ironic because it's Rice Street. It's so many Asian people who live there. And so that area, there's, in any rural or densely populated area, there's so many things that go on, and I have ties to each of these stories, whether it's personal. I grew up around gang members. My cousins were gang members. My best friend is who I actually modeled Jur after, and he's gay. So it's these stories and these personal ties that I kind of put them together. And Rice Street actually started off as like 3 different films, and they were never supposed to be together. But just when I wrote the 3 different films, just looking at them, it's so similar. They all take place in the same setting, same time. And I was like, okay, well, how can we weave these stories together? And that's kind of how those 3 stories came together.
Okay, wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to ask all of you if there's anything you'd like to share in this discussion, and any questions you have in general for each other as artists telling these stories. Flo, is there anything you'd like to share?
First off, I just wanted to say that it was an honor being a part of this film festival. This is my first time and actually my first time attending a film festival too. So
Great.
It's really cool. And also such an honor being able to tell Ever's story, and that he was so willing to be really open and honest, and that was sort of just like the tone of the entire film, because it's just honest and yeah.
Right. I think as an athlete, it's very easy to, have that tunnel vision and say, I have to do what I have to do. I can't be anything else for anyone else. I need to focus and compete. But clearly, Ever is seeing the value of sharing and, possibly being a role model, because maybe there weren't very many for Zur. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really cool to see, because Ever's like, I want to eventually have a collective of queer trans weightlifters, and sort of be a coach like in the future, and being that role model, like you said, for other people, because yeah. So yeah.
Great. Any other questions from the group or comments? Quincy, any thoughts?
I guess, well, I just wanted to say, it's an honor as well to be a part of DisOrient Asian American Film Festival. It's my first time as well, and it's exciting to just share time and see other films from other Asian American filmmakers. Yeah, and for anyone who does end up watching Midnight Rhythms, I just hope that they'll be able to connect with just the honesty that I try to infuse into just the poetry and the film, and hopefully be able to come out on the other end with some hope that, there's, like you said, there's the morning to come, and there's a hope in a new day. So
Yeah. Thanks. And Dan, anything you'd like to add?
I just once again want to thank you for hosting this event. There's nothing like this in Minnesota, so I'm so envious, and I really wish that we had something similar to this here. But thank you guys for hosting this event. I'm so thankful for it. For everyone who does watch Rice Street, I hope you enjoy my film, and I hope you get a little slice of Hmong American culture. We're a very small people, and not a lot of people even know who Hmong people are. So I hope that once you watch my film, you get a little slice of our culture and a little slice of Rice Street.
Right. Well, you have a little bit of attention from gymnastics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So yes, cool. And Grace?
Yeah, thank you so much, Pam, for just like having us in this Q&A. And I just feel like the intersection of being queer and being Asian is like very unique and special. So I'm just like super grateful always to like meet other queer Asian filmmakers. Like I feel like there's a lot of like queer films happening and lots of Asian films happening, but it's like not as common to like merge the two and like to have space for all of us.
Well, thank you for those kind words. And yes, before we close, I want to go around and also ask, what types of stories would you like to tell next? If you have any projects or ideas you have in the works, please share so we can follow and support. Quincy?
Yeah, I think moving forward for me, I would still want to be able to focus all my creative work and films on just queer films and Asian led films as well, whether those are separate or, if possible, merged together, like Grace was saying. So yeah, I'm hoping to write more poetry, and yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Grace?
I recently wrote a script for a short that I'm hoping to shoot this coming winter. Wonderful. Or like not this current winter, but like later this year. because I shot this short dog story at this point. It's been like 2 years ago, and just like took a long break from making work. So I'm excited for that and hope to start exploring like hybrid pieces and merging like documentary and fiction.
Wonderful. Keep us posted.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And Dan?
Yeah, I think I want to continue making like socially conscious films, and the next film that I'm actually working on, production starts in September, is about the story of Fong Lee. He was shot by the Minneapolis Police Department in 2006, and so he was 18 years old and he was shot 12 times. And so I'm gonna try to tell this story. So yeah, production begins in September, and hopefully we'll submit to DisOrient when it's
Wow,
done.
that would be great. So you're going from narrative to doc, yeah?
It's going to be a narrative.
Oh, and it will be a narrative.
Yes, it will
Okay,
be a narrative.
great.
Yes.
All right, we'll look forward to that.
Thank you.
And Flo.
Yeah, just sort of echoing everyone else, making documentaries, and as intersectional as these stories are. And I'm currently working on a personal documentary where I met my half sister for the first time.
Wow.
So and on our mom's side, and just reconnecting with my family in Wuhan, and without having any form of contact with them for 7 years. So it's been a journey. So coming soon. Yeah.
Great. Well, you're a talented storyteller, so we look forward to seeing that and enjoy the process. I've enjoyed chatting with all of you. We might not have had a chance to even meet, realistically, if not for the pandemic. So even though it would have been ideal to have a live Q&A, I'm really grateful just to have a chance to meet you virtually and have this conversation and share your perspectives. I hope that this conversation reaches a broad audience and that it's a catalyst for more discussions and about queerness in all communities. So thank you so much, and come back anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more thing. Yeah, one more thing. If for the audiences, if you watch these films, please rate them because they're all eligible for an Audience Choice Award. So please make sure you do that and tell us what you like. Thank you.